Sorry.
It's normally a little bit delayed, but should not be a problem.
I'm a little delayed too, so it's all good.
Come on, Rockfin. There she goes. And cool, we already got somebody who's already waiting. Boom, two people waiting. Good stuff.
Nice.
All right. And so I know with this channel in particular, I figured that I would set it up as soon as I got confirmation with you. That way my notifications can get out. I noticed that typically it takes 8 hours for my notifications to come out.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's normal, but that's how it works on my channel. But all right, let's go ahead and get started. This is a special political matrix where normally I would do my interviews on Been Thinking with Young Morpheus, but today I wanted to do this one over on the political matrix side because I know a lot of the topics that we're going to probably talk about hit on and echo the stuff that we talk about on the political matrix. So without further ado, I want to welcome, warmly Reed Coverdale from the Natural Capitalist. Reed does a lot of great work, and he's a man. He's an actual working man who's actually out there in the thick of things and has a better understanding. So he's not somebody who's just talking from, somebody who reads a bunch of theory and then hops online. He actually lives in the real world, deals with business, deals with working long hours, does a lot of driving, and I feel like is probably one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most honest and real people that I've spoken to who comes from, say, a right-leaning background. And I feel like he's really good at being able to hear, say, other points of views and being able to see what's good in there, what he agrees with, without compromising his own self and his views. So me and Reed met a little while back ago. I believe it was on Franco's channel. And, I felt like I really liked that guy. And we've gotten to do a couple of other, I guess, cameos together. But finally now I get to have him on my channel and get to, have him all to myself and pick his brain and ask some questions. So thank you so much for joining me, Reed. How are we doing, brother?
I'm doing well. Thanks for the kind words, man. It means a lot. Thanks for having me on.
Definitely. And shout out to everybody out there in the chat who's tuning in. Make sure you guys are following his channel. Make sure you guys are following him on Twitter now that he's back on, because as we were talking a little bit before, one of the things which happened with Elon taking over Twitter was he was able to bring Reed back on, which is a good thing. So I guess let people a little bit know about why you were kicked off of Twitter if they don't know.
Yeah, so I have not had Twitter for very long. I didn't have it until 2020. Like I actually haven't had a podcast very long either. I started the podcast in 2020 as well. And then I made a Twitter account and then I deactivated it actually, and then I brought it back in November of 2020, and throughout a year until October 2021, I actually got almost 20,000 followers just within that amount of time. And I said a lot of really hard in the paint political opinions and, lots of veiled, I don't know if you want to say threats, but like wishing ill on lots of politicians and like all sorts of stuff that I was kind of amazed it stayed above water as long as it did. And then they eventually got me just over it wasn't even a post, it was just a reply to somebody else's tweet. It was one of my friends, and it was just a complete joke about how I would shoot him if he came within 100 yards of my truck. And they yanked the account. I appealed it, I think almost somewhere around 100 times. I don't even know an exact number. And I did it probably like 10 or 15 times throughout a year. But then after Elon bought Twitter, and then after he actually started taking it over and bringing people back, I was doing it like every week. Then eventually they appealed my suspension, and now I'm back. So, there are some things I would do. I mean, my outline would be very simple. Just like, I understand there's some laws about like terrorism and, certain things that the government would restrict from being allowed on there, and there's not much you could do about that. But just about anything else, anything that wasn't breaking the law, I think should be allowed on there, regardless of how hateful or controversial or mean or whatever. And then you should be you can apply your own filters to what you see. So if you don't want to see certain stuff, you can mute certain words, you can block people. So I don't understand what's so controversial about just having an open platform where everyone can say whatever they want, and then you can kind of segregate yourself accordingly to what people say. If you don't want to be in this corner of Twitter, then don't interact with those people, block them, mute the keywords, whatever. But regardless of any criticisms, which I do have a few of Elon, it's undeniably better because I'm back. So I'll take it, I guess.
Yeah, I say for me, I do like it that different profiles that were yanked down that I feel it was unjust, like yours. What's another one? Riza Islam, RFK Jr. There are people who I felt like that they were taken down unjustly and they need to be brought back. I even felt like, even though I disagree with Trump on so much stuff, I disagree with taking Trump down. I think that sets a bad precedent when you start taking down actual world leaders, present or former, because they are a person of influence and people are still going to listen to them. And I feel like that's a way of kind of biasing the whole political system. So if somebody wants to question the elections, that shouldn't be something which gets their channel taken down or barred, which, we are on YouTube. So I still got to be a little bit careful with some of that stuff, because that censorship that was on Twitter that was so pervasive is, even worse, I would say, on, YouTube. But I do think that, like I say, there's some things which I would definitely suggest that, if I had any say so in what Elon Musk was doing to kind of help Twitter, there's some stuff that I would definitely suggest. But yeah, people don't really listen to me, so it doesn't really matter. Let's see. Another thing that I wanted to bring up, I wanted to bring up some of the stuff that we were talking about the first time we were on, and what was this? Maybe about, was it about almost 2 years ago? A little over 2 years ago, when we were on Franco's show.
The first conversation I remember was on Dak's show over January.
That's 6th. That's right. On the January 6th stuff. And we talked about how there were so many factors that were going on that led up to January 6th that we saw before time, that it was, if anybody was seeing those things and wanted to stop them, there was no reason why they could not have stopped them. And I'll bring up some of my points that I remember, but let people know just some of the stuff that you were talking about that you saw, because I definitely agree 1000% with what you were saying about the build up to January 6th and kind of I guess the perspective that we both have, that it was kind of allowed to happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, the entire year of 2020, all the rioting that had happened, we saw, lots of display of strong police forces, in the streets. And you had a very controversial ceremony, or whatever you want to call it, that was going to take place at the Capitol building, which is one of the most important buildings in the country, where they were going to confirm Joe Biden's election. And nobody who's serious thought that wasn't going to happen. They knew that the results were going to be confirmed, regardless of whether or not they think they were fair. And then you knew there were going to be, I don't know how many, but tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of Trump supporters there, and that they were going to be very upset with the result you were going to get. So I thought it was weird, given all those things, given the United States' obvious proclivity toward, militaristic police enforcement when they're trying to make a point or trying to prevent something from happening or whatever. there was basically none of that. There was no lockdown of Washington, D.C. There was no, National Guard presence around the Capitol building. And look at Washington, D.C. after January 6th. I mean, they literally put fences up everywhere and they had soldiers patrolling the streets. And I don't want people to get the wrong idea that I think that's good. I don't think that's good. All I'm saying is, if they're willing to do that, why wouldn't they have that in place when they knew something could potentially happen? So to me, that was a huge red flag that they didn't put security measures in place ahead of time when they knew this was going to be controversial and that there were going to be thousands of people there. And on top of that, it seemed like even the security that was there kind of let them in the building on January 6th. I thought this, like, I know since then there's been video footage and stuff that's made it even more obvious, but even back then it's like, what? Like, they just, these guys with no guns, and no military training and nothing, they just broke into one of the most important buildings in the United States. And we're not supposed to be skeptical about that at all. So I was extremely skeptical about it from day one. And I'm actually glad. I think that video is still up on Dak's channel because it's pretty.
It is now that you mention it is up still.
Yeah, I went back. I've gone back and watched it. Probably about a year ago a year ago. When all the January 6th stuff was getting rehashed and the hearings were starting to happen and everything, and all the video evidence that was coming out about, there being possible Fed provocateurs and, people being let in and all this stuff. And we called a lot of it right in that video. So, I mean, I didn't, the thing is, like, I don't think I'm some genius or something like that. That seems like kind of obvious stuff. I mean, like, it shouldn't be that hard to put it together, but a lot of people just, it was an insurrection and it was the most dangerous day in American history since the War of 1812 and blah, 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 like, whatever. So,
well, yeah, I mean, it's some of the points which I brought up, like, you didn't have to be a psychic or whatever. All you had to do is pay attention. If you had the FBI had all of these flood of emails, which were talking about that we're going to be there. You had all the people who were on Facebook who were talking about flying in and protesting and doing all this. You knew that there was going to be a lot of people there. You also knew that some of the accounts, which some could be fake, which I do believe some of these were, that were talking about, if this doesn't happen, we're going to do X. And it just seemed a little bit like, okay, whether you think that this is a Fed account, whether you think this is a real account, this is somebody that you should be watching. You should be watching accounts which are pushing for any kind of, insurrection type stuff. You should be watching for that. And it wasn't any of that. Also notice there was no like deploying of like any kind of gas or anything like that. When Trump went over to that church, I can't remember what he went over there for, but he went over to the church for something. It was just
photo op.
For a photo op. Right? Right on the spur of the moment. You were able to muster the National Guard in like 10 minutes. It took literally no time for him to muster the National Guard and march right over. And at the moment that you're seeing this getting out of control, that you couldn't have done that. Also, the fact that, and I think I brought this up, Danny, but Pelosi, a lot of people don't know this, but the Speaker of the House is control of Capitol Police, has control of Capitol Police. They can tell them, all right, you need to get this many more people out there. You need to allocate them to here, there. You need to do all these things. And there's plenty of documentation which showed that she did know about a possible threat, that she knew about an influx of people. And if you look at the amount of people who were scheduled there, it was scheduled basically like a normal day. I mean, that was something that was odd. The fact that you didn't start setting up barriers at an earlier stage of like, okay, you guys can protest and do whatever you want out here as long as you keep it peaceful, be kept outside. And then when you saw the videos, it was just ridiculous how you had a good, probably, I would say easily 50% of the Capitol Police that were just like, hey, well, if you guys want to march in, I mean, what can I do about it? I mean, very nonchalant. There was no like, I can get if you say, you know what, I feel threatened. I feel this is dangerous. It's only a handful of us and there's 1,000 of you guys. Or even say 100. You can get on the radio and say, hey, I can't stop the people. They're coming through. There was none of that you saw.
Mm-hmm.
Literally none of that. And so for us who I feel like look at things logically, if you're seeing all these things, then there's so many different measures that could be taken. The only thing that made sense to me and to Reed is that obviously this is being allowed to happen. And when you saw more of the video footage, that's exactly what it looked like. Now, were there some of the Capitol Police who might not have gotten the memo, alluding to like the Ashley Babbitt situation? Yeah, of course. And then maybe some people feel like, hey, I was going to let you guys through, but hey, now you want to come violent with me, then I got to, And I think some of that was egged on. And a lot of these things, like we found with the whole, I can't remember her name, but the governor of, was it Michigan?
Whitmer.
Whitmer. Yeah, Governor Whitmer. Yeah. What the whole kidnapping plot. We found that a lot of that was all completely egged on by the FBI, which a lot of times, if you start looking into these facts, because they put out the stuff and then later on, all the rest of the information, once that comes out, nobody reads through that stuff and filters. So when you start asking about some of these people, you could see a lot of like sketchy activity, clearly sketchy activity. And the fact that the media was so, it definitely seemed like they were picking a side and following a certain narrative. People should be questioning.
Like, a lot of people look at it in a binary way, like it's either organic or it's controlled, and in almost every scenario, it's somewhere in the middle, right? Like there's some sort of infiltration happening, but it's not like every single person who's involved with something is in on it and knows, like, some people were looking at it that way. Like they were, what's his name? Jacob Chansley. Is that the Buffalo headdress guy? Like,
yeah.
There were tons of people saying he was a Fed forever. They were like, oh, this guy's part of Antifa. And you've seen, and turns out none of that was true. He was just a dude who went into the Capitol building. But that doesn't mean that other people weren't part of it. I'm sure some of the like Ray Epps, people like him, very, very sketchy. And then there were probably some complete idiots who just really wanted to go into the building. And, once they were encouraged to, they went for it. And like you said, probably not all the police were in on it. Maybe a couple of them were. But people just have like these really like Hollywood view of how everything works. And it's not like everything is, systemically organized. Like sometimes there's just a couple people trying to instigate something, and people who are already fired up, they'll go along with it. And I think January 6th was very much that. There were several people who wanted a certain outcome, and then you can manipulate a lot of people into doing something like that,
I agree. And I'm glad that you brought that point up or pointed that out, because that's something which I say about a lot of things. With, when people start talking about like the WHO, or they start talking about the WEF, or if they're talking about, say, Masonic organizations, or like I'll give one which I was involved with, the military, for instance. Everybody in the military, it's a such thing called need to know information, and you're only allowed to know certain things in certain instances. Like, it doesn't mean like everybody who has even if you have top secret clearance, because some people who are not military don't get this. I had top secret military clearance. I had NATO top secret. I had access to the stuff that was pertinent to my job. That means I'm not going to know. I might know about different weapon systems and what's going on with this other country and NATO weapons and stuff, but that does not mean that I'm going to know about troop movements for the army. I mean,
Right.
and I don't think a lot of people get that. And that's one of the points I point out, like I was saying before with the WHO, the WEF, with some of these, trying to be careful how I say this, some of the stuff that's went on with like the lockdown policies that we saw. Some of the people in some of these positions, some of these world leaders are involved and they know what they're doing. But there are some people who are being gaslighted into believing certain things. And then they just become like true followers, no different than a Osama bin Laden in the Al Qaeda or Taliban.
Yeah.
You can get one leader and can twist a lot of people and make them true believers in something that's not true.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's how everything works, right? Like, I mean, if you think about just how a job site works, like it's one guy who's usually a foreman is directing how the whole job's going to go, and everybody kind of falls in line and does what they're supposed to do. You don't have to propaganda. I mean, you don't have to, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't have to like meticulously have a role for everybody pre-planned. I mean, if you're propagandizing everybody on a massive scale to think a certain way already, and you have that media apparatus on your side, then you can basically just push a few buttons and have the leaders, just like you have your foreman on the job site, say, do this, this, and this, and everyone will just kind of fall in line and do it. I mean, not everybody has to be a drone, like they can just be a normal person thinking the way that normal people do, and that propaganda machine will get them to do whatever they want. I mean, I've been victim to it before in the past, and I probably am on some level I don't understand right now. Like, I mean, it's decades of social engineering and media manipulation. It's serious stuff. It's not like you can always see it coming. So I don't know. I think that let's put it this way. It's not like the Matrix where you have agents and then just regular people. Like you have, it's a lot more like, it's a lot more of a gradient, a lot more of a sliding scale. Some people are bought into it way more than other people are. It's not like this in out thing, this black and white thing. It's very complicated, and people are bought into it on all sorts of different levels. And it's hard to pinpoint exactly where everyone is, I guess.
I completely agree, and I think that like I talked about earlier, coming from different vantage points, like I grew up in what would be kind of more a typical, Black Democratic family, you know, just basic Democratic stuff, and then you grew up with more of an evangelical right background, which you kind of migrated a little bit from that. I've migrated a little bit from that, and then we kind of meet somewhere in the middle. And though these different leans which we're taught, the different educational systems, location which you grow up in, all of these things matter, and just whatever's inputted into our basic CPUs, our brains, that we get from friends, families, experiences, all of these things generate. So there is still a form of control on us in the way we view things, and we are still being manipulated to a degree in certain things. For instance, if a person has a trauma that they've experienced, it might be a little bit easier to take that person who might be very wise on certain things and kind of get them tripped up on other things. Like, I'll give a perfect example. I was watching a show, and this girl, her friend, was saying, normally you'd be smart enough to catch this stuff, but because you want this to kind of happen, it leaves you a little bit blind. It's kind of like a friend seeing, dude, that girl doesn't really like you. She's using you. But because you want it to be true, you can't see that you're being manipulated in a sense. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a zone where even though you kind of know what's true, you don't want to accept it because it's not comfortable. So you'll kind of do everything you can to take the blue pill and just be like, nope, no, I don't want this. I don't.
Yeah.
And I think that's natural. I don't think that that's anything weird. I mean, I think people honestly seek out comfort above everything else. And I think that's one of the most dangerous things about our nature is that we seek comfort. We don't seek fulfillment or
Mhm.
and maybe I mean some of us do. That's the weird thing is like it's fulfillment is what I feel like we're supposed to be searching for, but comfort kind of gets in the way and a lot of
Yeah.
people let that drag them down. Um, and comfort is complacency, right? Like
Hmm.
it's being in a place where you don't have to think about the hard questions, you don't have to face the hard realities. You can just kind of go along with whatever is the easiest thing to think. But to really grow and become something beyond what you are now, you have to take that step. So it's this constant battle of comfort versus fulfillment because comfort isn't fulfilling. Comfort is the status quo. It's what you've known your whole life, whatever. It's, breaking out of your shell and trying to go to the next level is always tough. Nobody likes doing that.
Hmm.
And it's not enjoyable, but it's necessary. So, it's been one of humanity's greatest battles, and it's been interesting to watch over the decades too. Like
Hmm.
the 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 people who really excel and whose names we remember and whose inventions we still use are the people who weren't comfortable with what already existed or weren't happy with just going with the status quo. They push to the next level, figure out the next thing. And it seems like as time goes on, even though most people think everything's speeding up and getting faster and faster, in a lot of ways it's kind of slowing down. Like if you think about if you were born in 1900 and you died in the year 2000, like think about all the crazy changes you saw, like indoor plumbing, uh,
Yeah.
automobiles, flying, just like crazy, crazy
Hmm.
differences. Now think if you were born in like 1950 and you died in 2050. So I know we're only at 2023 right now, but it's kind of unlikely we're going to have another huge breakthrough like that. Like I know things have gotten more digitally expansive. Like we have computers and Wi-Fi and internet, and that's all crazy. But for the most part, our lives are kind of mostly the same. Like we still drive to work every day. We still put our food in the refrigerator. We get the mail. Like none of the structure of society has really changed. It's just become more available at our fingertips. And
Hmm.
people are becoming more and more comfortable and complacent and not willing to push boundaries that they were anymore. I kind of feel like around the turn of the millennia, we kind of reached a peak where we were in control of the most amazing technology we've ever had. We were able to do all sorts of crazy stuff and manipulate it to our uses, but it seems like we're getting to the point where the technology is starting to manipulate us instead and make us less impressive. Like if you watch Back to the Future from the
Hmm.
1980s, like the stuff that is envisioned in 2015, flying cars and we
Hmm.
haven't done anything like that. Like I mean
No,
we've we haven't
no.
progressed much at all. So
It's definitely been underwhelming.
yeah, so to me it seems like, and I might have strayed a little bit from the original point there, but it
No, no, no.
seems
You're
like
good.
everything has actually become less impressive as time goes on. Like, yeah, we have amazing computer animation in our movies, but like what have we haven't cured cancer, we haven't been to Mars, like we haven't done any of these things that everyone totally thought we would have been doing, because in the past it was always like, okay, what's next, what are we doing next, what are we doing next? And now we've just become so over saturated in pleasure and comfort that we don't even care about
Hmm.
going to the next thing. So I don't know, that's my rambling thoughts on
Well,
that.
well, I completely agree with that, and it makes me want to kind of go down a road. Um, I guess I'll do that. I got a comment. Got a comment/question over from GeoPro that I definitely want to ask you. And Shout out to
Sure.
Geo Pro and him car over there. But I'll ask this because it's kind of a long one. I want to make sure I keep the train of thought before I lose it, because you brought up something that I really thought about, especially because I was really big on a lot of those sci-fi movies, especially dealing with future and stuff like that. And one thing I felt like I never calculated or inputted into those changes would be um, consumerism and the greed of how corporations do things. And I feel like before we had a capitalistic system which it was about innovation, it was about trying to strive and see what new edges that we can reach. And now, I mean, even if you just look at our entertainment, it's about, okay, this is a proven commodity. How can we just do the bare minimum and
Yeah.
still get the same? And I feel
Mhm.
like because of the powers that be or who are more in control have gotten just lazier, I feel like we've gotten less. And I feel like innovation, imagination, all of those things have been completely just stifled out
Yeah.
a lot, especially in more of the so-called first world countries. You know, and I would say that looking back to history and looking at different empires, that's one thing that I notice a congruent theme. That first generation who's the more pioneering of that generation, they're really striving, and as it gets passed down to their kids who had a little bit of a more comfortable life and didn't have to strive and push anymore, each generation or iteration of that drive to push for more and to be more cutting edge and to take more gambles and risks on figuring things out and not being afraid to succeed or fail, a lot of
Yeah.
that started diminishing. And you start having, for instance, like the grandsons of like say MGM, who are those people who are still in charge, and they're like, I don't give a damn about your new idea, and they're not even entertaining this new idea. They're just like, hey, how much does it cost for us to just do a reboot of this already proven thing, and instead
Mhm.
of trying to figure out, well, we don't have to program in, was I'm trying to think of what's the word that Steve uses all the time. Was it program in adolescence of things so that
Mhm.
they how they program so much of this stuff to just last long enough that you need to go buy a new one to
Right.
to force more consumerism instead of saying
Oh,
we can just solve this and then come up with a whole new other thing which will revolutionize your life in a different way, and we can come up with a new product. And I feel like, especially like with people like the Steve Jobs, I'm not saying that Steve Jobs was literally sitting in there and he was, tinkering with every single microchip, but the vision point that he had inspired, innovators around him to be able to push, like for instance, the iPhone to a different level or to make the iPhone in the first place. And I think a lot of that's kind of just kind of fell off, the adding to the slowness that you talked about.
yeah. Yeah. So for example, like I'll bring my job into this a little bit. So uh with a manual transmission in a truck, you can have 18 gears, which gives you all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of range. But the company I'm working at right now, they've for the last 10 years they've been phasing out the manuals because they can't find anyone who still knows how to drive them. So now we have some heavy haul trucks that have 6 gears and they're automatic and they just slug up the hills. It's just ridiculous trying to haul something
Yeah.
heavy. And so that's a prime example of where we've gotten as a society. Like someone from 20 years ago who was like, holy crap, they have this truck with 18 gears that can just climb this hill right away. What's it going to be like 20 years from now? And instead, it's like, oh, it's less impressive. And then the person
Mm-hmm.
who's operating it is less impressive. And I feel like you see that on so many levels. Like you were talking about Steve saying, they make stuff just long enough till you need to replace it. Like think of washing machines from the 1980s, like how long they would last. And imagine back in 1980s, someone thinking about oh, in 2020, the washing machines are going to last for 100 years. They're going to know how to make them, now they last what, 2-3 years if you're lucky, and
Mm-hmm.
you can't get a piece and
Programmed
fix them anymore.
adolescence. That's what
Yeah.
it was. Programmed adolescence.
So it's the way everything's become. So it hasn't only made the equipment less impressive, it's also made the people less impressive, because back in 1980, it wouldn't have been uncommon for a homeowner to order whatever part they needed to fix their washing machine, where nowadays it's just throw it out and get a new one. So you haven't just dumbed down the machine, you've also dumbed down the person, because no one
Mm-hmm.
knows how to fix anything. I mean, next week, the reason I'll be driving through Kansas next week is I'm flying out to Colorado and picking up a 1991 Chevy pickup that I found out there with no rust. And why am I flying all the way to Colorado to get a 1991 Chevy pickup instead of just buying a new one? Well, it's because that old Chevy, like if something breaks on it, I can order a part and fix it. And it doesn't have all the new electronics that go wrong that, I need to work for NASA in order to know how to fix.
Mm-hmm.
One of my coworkers was talking about how on his wife's car, to replace the headlight, you have to take the wheel off. So you have
Mm-hmm.
to remove the wheel so you can take this plastic shroud out from the wheel well and then reach up inside and unscrew some bolts and then take the headlight housing out. Like on this Chevy pickup I'm getting, it's just like one screw you take out and pop the headlight out and put it back in,
Mm-hmm.
so I do think it's all intentional. I mean, I think with entertainment, like you were saying, it's not thought provoking anymore. There's no point to
Mm-hmm.
anything anymore. It's just all about, momentary stimulation. And then the same, I mean, just everything across the board has taken the pride of ownership and ability. That's the other thing, is nobody owns anything anymore. Everything
Mm-hmm.
for decades has been, oh, all you got to do is put a dime down and you can own this $40,000 car, even if you only make 15 grand a year.
Yeah.
So you'll make payments on a car for the entire life of the car. And by the time you finally paid the car off, the car is no good anymore and you have to get a new one. So you're
Mm-hmm.
trained into never actually owning anything yourself, never, you know, never having, like, never owning land, never owning a house, never owning a car. You've got all these
Mm-hmm.
payments on all these different things that aren't yours. And believe me, they're not yours, because if you stop paying rent for them, technically, they will
Mm-hmm.
come and take them away from you. So it's just been a complete gutting of everything it is to be an American. That was the American dream, was like, move to America, own your own house, own your land, own a car or two, have a washing
Mm-hmm.
machine. And, like, these are all the big things that people around the world were like, whoa, really? I could do that? And now you can't. Like, even if you're making 100 grand a year, it's still pretty hard. So yeah, own nothing
Yeah.
and be happy. That's it right there.
In fact, if you think about it, what you said, even if in America you own your own house, you own your own land, if you don't pay the taxes on it, they could still come
Yeah,
and take it from you.
exactly.
So you still never truly own anything. I mean,
Right.
like it blew my mind when I was talking to somebody in Ireland, and they were saying that, yeah, their house, they own it. Like there's no taxes on their house. Like
Yep.
if they decided, you know what, I'm not going to work anymore at all. They might not have utilities, but they still own that house. They still own that land, and they don't have to worry about it being taken away. And I just thought, wow, that's
What a
such a
concept.
crazy, what a concept, exactly. And that
Yeah.
shouldn't be that way because it used to be that way here,
Right.
except for just the amount of greed at the top level that's happened to pervert the system. This is the system that we're now living in, you know. And I feel like it's at this point, I don't really believe necessarily, oh, well, if you go completely conservative, then that fixes everything. Or if you go, Marxist or communist, that fixes everything. It's not necessarily about the systems. It's about the people that sit at the tops of the systems who are going to manipulate whichever system into however they want to use it. Because when it comes down to it, the bankers really run all this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to push back on that a little, because I do think that the system makes it a lot easier. Because, like, I mean, if you think about greed in itself, greed is a pretty natural human
Mm-hmm.
emotion, but greed on its own is harmless, right? It doesn't actually do anything. Like if I want all the money in the world, okay, like I will
Mm-hmm.
want all of it, but what power do I have as Reed Coverdale
Mm-hmm.
to extort other people? I don't have any. Like I can't
Yeah.
screw everybody over. I can't invade a country and like take all their natural
Mm-hmm.
resources. But if you have this enormous government that we do with these massive police arms and um these massive income stealing arms, the IRS, the just all these incredibly huge bureaucracies that have
Mm-hmm.
the authority to throw you in prison if you don't
Mm-hmm.
fund them. Then it's very easy for them to say, okay, well, we want to do this, and this, and then
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
can, and then they can like, uh, so even if you have, I would say, even if you had like the most well-intended people in that position, when you have that amount of power at your disposal, it's very easy to become corrupted, even if your intentions are good. And I feel like a lot of the power expansion that's happened over the last 100 years has been under the guise of humanitarianism, because
Mm-hmm.
the people who are pushing for it, most of them definitely have nefarious
Yeah.
intentions, but they'll sell it as like, we got to do this to protect the poor, we got to do this to protect the environment, we got to do this to protect democracy in the Middle East, like, choose whatever it is you want. And so that's how they sell it to the public. Then the public will
Mm-hmm.
be on board. And then if you're against whatever that thing is, you hate America, or you hate democracy, you hate freedom, whatever. Like if so, the Iraq
Mm-hmm.
War is a great example. That was
Yeah.
something that they sold to the American public. Originally, it was about weapons of mass destruction, but then it became about like the people in Iraq. They
Terrorism.
need
Yeah.
they need freedom. Like these are good people, and they need to be free just like us. And no sane person in America is going to think that freedom for people somewhere is bad, right? Like, of
Of
course,
course.
we want everyone to be free. So then they use that to weaponize, um, to weaponize people against dissenters. Because then if you're a dissenter, then it's not that you're skeptical about what they're saying, or that you don't really agree that this is going to be the goal. You just hate the things that they want for everybody. So I think that's been systemic throughout, going more
Oh,
than a couple
I
hundred years
completely
ago.
agree.
But
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And that pushback, and I guess maybe I wasn't clear enough, but I do feel like the powers that be, because of the massive amount of power that they have, is the problem.
yes,
Because they'll guise it to you. Oh yeah, we're giving you your whatever form that you believe, but it's still it's still basically functioning at the means of which it's always been focused at. It just has a little different lens to it. I guess
yeah,
let me grab that question slash comment. GeoPro says, "Hey Reed, heard you live in New Hampshire now. Was Free State Project influencing you to live there? Also, Madge Ture is going to was it Pork Fest?
Sport
Not
Fest.
sure
Yep.
that to check out New Hampshire, and is thinking about moving there from Philly.
Yep.
Not into political parties, but the Mrs. Caucus has a lot of good things going, especially having Maj Toure, Donnie the Don, Jeff Charles, and other reaching out to the black uh, liberty. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, so I figured you might know more
Yeah,
about
I
what's going on
understood.
there.
I understood all those buzzwords. So that's
Yeah, I'm like I have no
yeah, no,
clue who any
I
of
can
those
tell.
people. I know Maj Toure. I don't know anybody else.
Yeah.
I be in my own little world.
Yeah, so the Mises Caucus is what he's talking about there. That's a faction of the Libertarian Party, and Jeff Charles and Donnie the Don, they're I don't know where Jeff's from. I think he's from Texas, maybe. I forget. And then I don't know where Donnie's from either. But Maj Toure, he's from Philadelphia. Have you ever, the Black Guns Matter thing? Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're all black, and so he's saying like it's good seeing some black libertarian leaders or whatever. And yeah, Maj is going to be at Pork Fest, which is in the end of June here in New Hampshire. He's going to come speak, and he's thinking about moving here, which is kind of big because in New Hampshire for 20 years now, we've had the Free State Project, which the idea has been, there's 330 million Americans in this country, and basically none of them agree with freedom. Most of them are like, it's a bumper sticker, like, yeah, America, freedom. But when it comes down to it, like, they never oppose the next war. They never oppose the next vaccine mandate. They never oppose the next anything. They just get swept up. So the idea is, let's concentrate everybody who's had enough in one state so that they can actually make changes. And New Hampshire's finally starting to get to the point where a lot of those changes are starting to happen. More people are moving here. I'm from New Hampshire. I was born and raised here, but I've lived in Arizona, Utah, and Colorado. And I just moved back here from Utah last year. And the Free State Project was, a huge reason why I moved back. But yeah, Maj Toure's thinking about moving here, and it would be great to have more libertarian figures think about moving here, because it's the libertarian state. It's the Free State Project. So, I'd be all about anyone else wanting to move there. So
yeah, I don't know much about New Hampshire in general. I know more about let's say I've lived in of course,
I'm
Kansas
glad
City.
that New Hampshire's a state. Like when I was out in Utah, they'd be like, New Hampshire, is that like part of New Jersey, or is that like a county in New York, or what?
Oh my God.
No one knows.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I grew up knowing a little bit about New Hampshire, not a lot. I do know that of those northeastern states, which is kind of has a lot of ruralness. I've heard people who say that, especially like people of color, say that they run into less racism in New Hampshire than they run into in other parts of the Northeast. So that's always something that I thought was pretty cool. I know that it's a state that's definitely big about their freedom and hunting and outdoors nature. And so that's one thing I thought is cool too. I like that. And that's pretty much as I know that a lot of those people are kind of more 9-to-5 type people, outdoorsmen who just kind of more back to, I would say, more of a classic America, back to before it got more industrialized and where people kind of lived more on their own land and kind of did their own thing and kind of had their own difference of faith and beliefs and however they wanted to. And so it's kind of one of those places, like maybe certain parts of like the Carolinas, which have kind of been not so much involved in every single political twist and turn that's went on. I mean, being from the state of Kansas, I've definitely been like in the middle of like a lot of that state has a long history on going through a lot of the twists and turns of this country, especially like a lot of people don't realize when you see these old Western movies, they weren't talking about California. Like the West was like Kansas, Missouri, Texas, like Colorado, New Mexico. That was the West. That's the old West. And so, the Wyatt Earps and Doc Holliday and stuff like a lot of that stuff happened, kind of floating through these areas, especially like Western Kansas. And so you dealt with that. You dealt with different racial struggles. You dealt with Brown versus the Board of Education, a lot of different kind of racial stuff went on. And especially like my county, there's a big tie-in between the indigenous population, Native American culture. A lot of the counties and cities and stuff like is literally still has, native tribal names. Shawnee, you have the Kaw River, I mean, there's a lot of different stuff that's right in that area. And so you had this big divide between, you had kind of some rural black farmers. Like a lot of people don't, like, I just found this out. My mom told me about this, and she ran across, I'm forgetting his name, but they had a man, he was considered an exoduster, which was one of the, he was known as the potato king of the world for a while. And Edwardsville, Kansas, which is in Wyandotte County, right in the outskirts of Kansas City, Kansas, was literally like one of the most wealthiest black men of all time. And like they basically like kind of stole his land and kind of like, yeah, let's just kind of forget about him completely out of history. And so there's been a lot of different stuff that's went on there that we've been right in the midst of everything. So, but at the same time, it still has that tie to kind of like the Bible Belt kind of thing, and then kind of more the old school of outdoorsmen, hunting, fishing. So it's kind of that mix of getting the city and the country and race issues. And so there, I felt like that's the reason why kind of most people in the Midwest don't really fit in with coastal liberals. And then they also don't really fit completely with conservatives either. Though there's both there, you have an influx of both. You have Democrats who carry guns there, which you know a lot of conservatives don't even think that really exists. And then you have Republicans who some of them are a little bit more cool with the whole Black Lives Matter stuff, because you have that influx of the communities, those two so-called separate communities interacting more. And so there's more understanding, even if it's not complete, accepting this person's views or that person's views. There's more kind of a understanding and a mutual respect in a sense.
Yeah.
So, because my high school I went to, when my mom went there, it was a predominantly white school. Well, not predominantly, it was a white school. She was like some of the first black students who went there, and like literally had her teachers tell her, none of you bleeps will pass my classes and stuff. Whoa. Yeah, like flat out, like like none of you are going to graduate. Like it was outright like heavy racism. And for her to graduate from that school, and 20 years later for me to graduate from that same school, and it being such a different dichotomy, like a really like mixed school, like I want to say easily probably say about 45% white, about maybe 20-30% black, and the rest mostly being Latino, and then a little bit of Asian mixed in there. It was more understanding of kind of different perspectives.
Yeah.
Shout out to Shannon out there, says, hey guys. But yeah, just giving you that little background, because a lot of people don't understand why, where there's a little bit of a difference in understanding, that I would say from a person like me, and why I can kind of understand where some people from the right might be coming from a little bit more, and have more of a sympathetic ear, even though when I was in my political, lens, I would have probably been more of a democratic socialist.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's see. My high school only had 120 kids in it.
Oh, wow.
I had a graduating class of, I think, 28 people, and we were all white. Or, well, no, there was one Asian guy, but everyone else was white. The first black guy I ever knew was when I lived in Colorado on a roofing company. And I told him that too. I was 21 or 22. And I told him, like, you're the first black guy I've ever known. So that was what it was like when I grew up, because I just lived in rural New Hampshire in the middle of nowhere. But there's only one guy that I know growing up and working over the last 10 years in New Hampshire who I remember being a flaming racist. There's only one guy ever. Like, it's just something that people don't really care about. And like, there'd be black people working at places where I'd work, and like no one cared. Like, it was just like kind of, I mean, like we just got other things to worry about. And then I lived in cities, and I like found out about the different gangs and the different like types of backgrounds people come from, and then why they do care about that type of stuff. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know. I guess I get how that could happen, but growing up in the country in the middle of nowhere, like it's just something I never cared about. Um, but yeah, I had my friend actually from Colorado. He got shot like 8 times in the abdomen when he was in his early 20s by a Mexican gang that because he grew up in San Antonio, and I guess like the blacks and the
Oh,
Mexicans did
it's
not
bad down
get
there.
along.
Bad.
So
I got family in
yeah,
Texas. It's bad down there.
yeah. So like all that type of stuff's completely foreign to me just because of my background and where I grew up. Like no one really gave a shit what color anybody was or anything. But yeah, it's a different world in different places, and I don't know. I'm understanding that it's a different
Yeah.
world. So yeah.
Well, I mean, and I think that just having the, being able to allow yourself to engage and get understanding from those different worlds is how we can actually grow and have more understanding of people and actually start resolving certain issues. You don't have to have experienced or grew up in exactly what a person's experienced to just open your ears and listen. And I think that goes a long way. One of the things that I really liked about you, because I know that like I remember you saying before in an interview that just because somebody believes something I disagree with, that doesn't make me just shut down everything they say. I listen
Mhm.
because there's still maybe some stuff which they're going to say, which like, okay, well, I do agree with that. I do think they make a good point here and there. And so, I mean, one kudos that I wanted to say to you also. But I was wondering, I guess let's hop into a couple of little topics. I don't know how long you have today. I don't want
I
to
can go
talk your whole head
I can
off.
go to like 2:30 or so like 25 minutes.
Good, good. That's what I was thinking. Um, so I was wondering, and I was telling, I mean, I have my so-called conspiracy theories in a sense, and
Hmm.
until I have enough evidence to kind of push forward on some of that stuff, I'll just leave them at that. And I put the disclaimer out there; these are just theories. Um, and I was wondering, kind of pick your brain on this. We had Bob Lee, Cash App CEO, hit
Hmm.
him dying, and the story being that well, it's possibly has to do with the guy who stabbed him, maybe something going on improper with his sister or something like that. And I'm like, okay, that's what we're being told, but if I'm looking at the lens of CBDCs and I'm looking at Fed now, probably what has it been at this point, maybe about 6 months ago when they announced, that, hey, by July, we will be seeing an actual Fed now. The government will be proposing that and doing their own
Yeah.
CBDCs. In that time, you had the Sam Bankman-Fried kind of situation going on in the arrest and house arrest. You had Meshuggah and I can't remember the other guy with him. Both of them had mysterious deaths. You've had these couple of these small bank runs on like a good 4 or 5 different banks and weird speculation, and all of these all tie into the crypto market. And if you look at banking as a whole, you don't hear any of this stuff. There's been more stuff going on in this smaller sector, this small particular category of the banking area than all of banking as a whole. And for me, that just seems a little bit unusual that there's more to it. And I don't necessarily see that all of these can just be isolated incidents, that there's not connecting to something. So I was wondering, what's your thought? Am I just being a little bit too Jim Carrey and number 23 connecting too many dots, or do you think it could be something possibly there?
Yeah, so I don't have any evidence and I honestly haven't looked into any connections between all those murders enough. All I can say is that it does seem pretty obvious that there's big change coming, and they want to capitalize on it to create a CBDC. Um, Especially a lot of people aren't talking about what's going on the foreign policy geopolitical level with
Mm-hmm.
Saudi Arabia.
We talk about it.
Well, yeah, I know we do, but I mean, I just mean the mainstream media
Mm-hmm.
and regular people. Although I have been hearing, I gotta admit, I have been hearing more about it in the last couple months than I think I have the rest of my life. So they're talking about it more, just not enough. But it could really be the end of the dollar and the
Yeah.
petrodollar and the
Yeah.
U.S. global hegemony when it comes to money. So it's a great excuse to start getting rid of cash and just using a completely digital currency.
Mm-hmm.
The excuse could be that this hasn't been reliable enough the way we've been doing it, which, by the way, I agree with. It's one of the
Yeah.
few things they'd be right about. It's just I don't want the same solution they do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, whether or not all those people were murdered purposefully as part of an agenda, there's definitely an agenda taking place. And
Mm-hmm.
the problem is it makes sense. That's the biggest thing that sucks about all this is so like the vaccine passport thing that they floated a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, that made perfect sense, right? Like logically, it's way, and why stop at a vaccine? Why not just have your medical history, your banking history? I mean, we're getting close to that anyway. It's all on your phone. It used to be in different files, in cabinets and, different paperwork you'd filled out. But now it's like all digital, it's all on your phone. But why not go an extra step and just put it in a microchip in your wrist or something? And you
Mm-hmm.
can, if you pass out on a sidewalk somewhere and some EMT picks you up, he doesn't have to rifle through your wallet hoping that you have medical information or hoping you're wearing a bracelet or something. Like you can just scan your microchip, instantly knows what allergies you have, knows if you're diabetic, knows if you have asthma, whatever. You
Mm-hmm.
could start your car. You don't even need keys anymore. Just like flash your wrist across the ignition. You don't need a key to lock your house anymore. Just have it. I mean, it all makes sense, right? Like it's more and
Yeah.
more efficient. You can't lose it. It's on your person all the time. The drawback is how easily all this stuff is controlled. And that's always been the drawback. And it's always been the direction we've been going. It's
Mm-hmm.
easier for you, but it's also easier for them, and very few people fight against the grain. So I am not optimistic on the future of CDBCs, meaning,
Neither
meaning
am
I
I.
think they'll definitely be a thing and people will go along with them.
I mean, to kind of not hide the ball, overall, I believe all of that is all coordinated. A lot of people, I don't know if a lot of people have talked about it. I mean, I know we talked about it briefly, and shout out to Baba Yaga. She sent me a story that one of the things you brought up, the bracelets. That's something that was that they were working on. Which I'm trying to remember what city. I'm blanking. The East Palestine. That's something that was an experimental project that they were working on. It's one of the cities that was experimental city for those bracelets for the EMTs to just be able to scan. And have, and they were like, oh, it's only going to have whatever information you want to put on it, only your medical information.
Yeah.
But I've been talking about for some time that bracelet, the digital IDs, with the whole COVID stuff that they were talking about, the biohack stuff that's been coming out. People talking about, oh, well, you can just put this chip in and then be able to check on your phone, your blood pressure, your fat content, all this stuff like that to be healthier.
Yeah.
And then also on the other side, the whole, oh, well, you won't need keys anymore. You won't need that anymore. I think the company's Brightmore, Bitmore. I'm forgetting the company in particular. This company has been pushing more and more for the chips. And I've even seen chipping parties and even in like Texas. This is something that, it's kind of been big in Sweden about, having the RFID chip in your hand. And so I think that a lot of this stuff has been kind of more gearing towards that. I can be wrong. People can disagree, but I just think that because of the convenience for somebody who wants to control you, it does make logical sense that you would want to go in that direction. And that ties in, I think, which you were mentioning, getting the older truck that you can fix on your own without all the hookups and the computerized stuff. I think all of that is forming into these cars which can be controlled, so that
Mhm.
if police are like, you know what, we got all this evidence that Reed was doing X, Y, and Z, and now he's an enemy of the state. Boom, we could just stop his truck and then go and pick him up wherever he is. Or if you have a vehicle that has the technology, we could just make the vehicle take him directly to whichever black site or
Yeah.
police force we want. And I think we're seeing this because I think that it's kind of where a lot of these so-called elites or predatory class would like to take us. And you
Yeah.
mentioned with the other countries, a lot of these other countries, China, Saudi Arabia, UAE, they're already, and some in Europe like Denmark and stuff, are a little bit further ahead with working on these, CBDC currencies.
Yeah.
And so the US is kind of actually behind a lot of these countries on doing this. And so I think there's some smoke there to all of these things, and you know with a lot of these other countries too, which I think that it's like we were talking about, everything is not always that black and white, that binary, that they're
Mhm.
all doing this. But I do think that they all are pushing for this, and it's all being pushed for a reason together.
Yeah, so I'm assuming you've read 1984 and
Oh
Brave
yeah.
New World. So I think the 1984 approach is way harder to maintain because it's basically the jackboot on your neck,
Hmm.
and people rise up against that eventually.
Yeah.
It instigates rebellion, it causes resentment, people hate you. And so it's only, I mean, you can only do it for so long and then you'll eventually
Hmm.
lose your grip. Um, where the Brave New World approach is a lot more easy. You just you give people what they want, and then you can take their rights away, basically. So
Yeah.
you satisfy them, you satiate their desires, you stimulate them, and then they'll give you whatever you need.
Hmm.
And I feel like we've seen the Brave New World strategy playing out in the long game for decades, where when you have the 1984 strategy step in for a little bit, people actually push back against it. So like
Hmm.
over the last couple of years, when they were talking about doing a nationwide vaccine passport, it actually rallied a ton of um counter offensives against it. People were like, no, hell no, we don't want this. But just give it 5 years and it won't be a COVID passport. It won't be an authoritarian measure. It'll just be like, hey, guess what, guys? You can get this microchip and you can do all this. And then people
Hmm.
will line right up for it. It's not like you need
Yep.
to do this or we'll do this. It's just, okay, guys, here you go. Take this. Look at how much this will help you out. And then people won't have any opposition to it. And it's really hard to fight. I mean, people don't go against the grain. People don't
Hmm.
do the harder, more independent lifestyle. They just don't. They'll go with whatever's easiest. So it's kind of scary.
Well, yeah. I mean, and to add to that, if your employer decides, just like with the whole vaccination thing, well, certain people were like, if you don't take this, you lose your job, or your kids can't go to school. I mean,
Yeah.
what happens when, say for instance, you work for a school district and they say, you know what, all employees of the school district have to have this, or fine, you don't have to get it, but now that we're on this is the way you get paid.
Yeah.
And so your money will just sit in an account then, and that's on you. What are
Yeah.
you going to do? And so that's another way, which I think down the road that you'll start seeing more of these things forced. And like I've read that, and then also reading Morals and Dogma. with Albert Pike's book, it alluded to a lot of the stuff which we're seeing now, and that's the reason why I tell people I'll tell people it is not an easy read. It's a very, very tough read because it's, no pun intended. It's very convoluted how he writes, and it's confusing. So you have to really stick with it. But there's a lot of stuff that's being foreshadowed, and this, keep in mind, this book is written in what, like 1879 or something crazy. It's like, super, super old book where this man is literally talking about all the different things which, you know, him and his organization, their accomplishments or their goals, which they push for. And you're literally now today, we're living in a lot of this stuff. I mean, foreshadowing of World War II, World War One, the countries that would be on the sides of it, or World War III, like all of these things were like put into that book. And so I don't know, it's just kind of interesting. What are some of the political things that you think? I mean, of course, we have the Russia-Ukraine stuff going on. Of course, we have, what looks like, well, we're kind of in a Cold War, between China and Russia over Taiwan. I'm seeing stuff which looks like it's building up between Iran and Israel also. And I'm just wondering, like, what are your thoughts on some of this geopolitical stuff, how it might weigh? Because I'm even seeing France is getting a little skittish about China and China and the U.S. And you're starting to see like even other Turkey and other countries which are like, I don't know if we're really with you, U.S. and Great Britain, or we're going to be there for NATO. And it's like you're starting to see a little bit of, I believe we're seeing a little bit of a falter, and cracks starting to show within NATO. So some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's not like China is replacing the United States or Russia. It's just the United States is losing its unipolar hegemony, right? So we're no longer going to be the dominant world power. And a lot of people take that to mean that Russia and China are. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think it just means that we won't be dominating the South Pacific anymore, which, why are we dominating the South Pacific anyway? Like, it's nowhere near us. There's Hawaii, but outside of Hawaii, like, why are we in the South China Sea? Why are we even sailing warships through the Strait of Taiwan? Why are we, sending billions of dollars in weapons and aid, and now apparently boots on the ground to a border dispute between Russia and Ukraine, 7,000 miles away from where I am in Northeast United States? It just doesn't make any sense. So
almost 10,000 miles from me.
Yeah, I don't think it really should be looked at as a horrible thing that the United States is losing its global hegemony. In fact, it could be great for the United States in the long run. I don't think this is necessarily the end of our country. I think this is a reset. This is a necessary thing that has to happen. Like, we have to kill our empire in order to, remain a thing. And I'm someone who's a fan of the idea of secession. Like, I think it would be great if New Hampshire left or Florida left, but I don't think any of them ever will. Like, I don't really think that's a realistic thing. I'm more about nullification. I think that's a more serious thing that could happen. Just basically, reduce the federal government to a posturing, symbolic being instead of something that's running all the states. But in order for this country to go back to being an economic, superpower of, prosperity, where people are having higher standards of living and everything, the empire has to end. I understand that the empire has spurred on some perks here and there. It's helped with the window dressing, but long term, we've completely gutted our monetary system in order to maintain our warfare system. That's why we have so much inflation now, is because we created a debt-based economy where we would borrow money at low interest rates so that we could pay the credit card off to fight these wars. And the long-term effect of that has been printing way more money than we should have and devaluing the dollar to almost nothing. So in order for that to turn around, we have to go through a serious recession. We have to go through military defeat and withdrawal. It sucks. Like, it's not going to be fun, but it kind of has to happen. So, as much as everything that's coming down the pipe is going to hurt, I think it's completely necessary. And in a lot of ways, it's actually good that it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that would be more of a positive outlook than what I see. Although, I mean, that's possible it could go that direction. I think because of the people who really yield the power in America, I feel that they can't stand losing that hegemony. That they're one of those. Well, if we can't have it, nobody has it, kind of. So let's. I think it would get provoked to the point where they might actually take massive attacks here on American soil.
I don't know, because it's getting to the point, like you said, France is already starting to get shaky on it. Saudi Arabia has turned their back on us. They're like, screw you guys. Thanks for all the weapons and everything. But
Yeah.
yeah, we're going with these guys. So, I mean, maybe, but I feel like so there's like two different levels of people. There's like the Liz Cheney, Lindsey Graham, like insane warmongering, like suicidal retards out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like the more like traditional America first. We will kick those terrorists in the ass and we'll show them who's boss.
Yep.
But even those people, when they see what's happening and they're like, wait, we want to go to war with Russia? Like, come on. No, we don't. Or like war with China, like, what's the guy's names? Who's the Republican who got caught? George Santos, the drag queen guy. Like, even he's been coming out hard against this war with China stuff, and I don't know, like I feel like that it's gotten so crazy that you're going to see people who are traditionally more on the side of militarism and maintaining the American empire. A lot of those people, even though they're nowhere near you and I, they are also not suicidal maniacs who want to blow the world up. They're like, whoa. I just like the idea of having a big, strong military and a safe country or whatever, but this is like getting a little too crazy. And I feel like we're going to start seeing those cracks form more and more. And even though there is a dangerously large amount of the Nikki Haley's and the Lindsey Grahams in our government, I think a lot of people aren't that insane, and it's been harder to tell them apart in the past because it's been over like Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan or whatever. But now we're talking about like Russia and China and World War III, and people are like, whoa, like even Henry Kissinger throughout the last couple of years has been like, whoa, guys, like let's back up here a little. I mean, Henry Kissinger, he's
Yeah.
scum of the earth, but even he is like, whoa, guys, come on. So I'm a little optimistic that there's enough opposition to the insane. I mean, don't get me wrong, we're gonna be helping Israel kill the Palestinians forever, but the big stuff like China and Russia, I'm a little optimistic that it's gonna start losing support and that we are gonna start withdrawing. I think it'll happen.
I don't know. I mean, it's always possible. I of course, for those that know, a lot of my audience, they know that I'm a faith-based person. So I know you're an atheist, but I do believe in like biblical prophecies. Now the difference is I'm not a Christian, and the Christian worldviewing, and because like from your interview with Adam Green, I realized like it was interesting hearing it because I realized most people who are atheists have the biblical interpretation of what Christianity has preached, in which I believe that that's a misunderstanding of what's being talked about there in many ways. But because of that misunderstanding, it leads more people to believe that it's not, that none of the prophecies stand to. And that's where I would disagree. And it's a peaceful disagree. I have nothing against anybody who doesn't agree with what I believe. And I don't try to force my beliefs on people who don't agree. I just, in my own understanding, I mean, I can go into it at another time, but I just think that I don't know if it's going to happen on the rate which I think I'm seeing it happen, or if it might happen for 50, 20, 30, 100 years, maybe longer. But I think that eventually those people who are warhawks, and I don't even believe that they're entirely pushing this because of what they believe. Some of these people, I believe they're pushing this because interests above them are getting them to push on it, and they're being reassured that, oh, don't worry, you don't have to worry. That's not going to happen, when these powers that be know where they're really trying to push this end goal. And because at the same time, they're over here telling somebody, hey, they're doing this. They're playing both sides of the fence, is what I'm saying. Like, a lot of people don't realize, like, the Civil War, they were funded, the North and South were funded by the same people. And they were telling both two different stories. And what upset the apple cart, and I don't know if a lot of people know this or not, but Russia sent over warships to aid the North and open up blockades, or the South would have won. And so that harkens back to some of the animosity towards Russia. It goes deeper than it's often let in, but I think that certain powers that be are pushing towards a precipice because they feel like they'll escape the worst of all the stuff that's coming, and have no problem with sacrificing a whole bunch of other people and basically letting a whole, hundreds of millions of people get genocided. Genocided as in possible nukes or possible power grid shut down, and, mass chaos in the streets, and, all kind of different things like that. Whereas it basically just lets the nation kind of tear itself apart. And I do believe that some of these people who are up higher than that ultimately do want that.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if that's what they want. I just think that there's a high possibility that enough people are against it now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the only thing that gives me hope, is that the general public, and even not even just the general public, but your typical scumbag politician even doesn't want World War III, and things are getting so crazy that some people might be like, okay, let's back off. But I mean, who knows? We could all blow up tomorrow. It's all kind of terrifying. I actually just did a thread about this. Like, some people just sit in their bunker piling up ammo and creating, making like emergency food to live after the nuclear fallout for decades. And it's like, all right, you can do that, but I'd rather go up in the blast and live my life the best I can in the meantime.
I tell people, just prepare to have a bug out, an escape, a backup plan. You see it starting to go sideways, start thinking, you know what? Time for me to get my shit and go figure a safe landing spot for me. I would not plan the whole bunker route, because you'd have to come up. What are you going to do? Like, put these like super huge decontamination suits on and walk around? I don't get how that works, or how if it's that, or being caught in the blast. Yeah, I'm just gonna walk straight outside when it happens and prop up a chair. I would rather just deal with that than, and I tell people, I come from the lens of I just want the truth, good, bad, or ugly. Just like like my show's theme. The political matrix. It's about that search for the truth. I was big on like the X-Files back in the day. The truth is out there, so that's more my lens. I would rather know the truth, even if it's inconvenient. Yeah, man, this has been good. We're at about an hour 25. And I'll get you out of here, brother, and definitely appreciate this. Any kind of closing words which you want to go in? Any topics that you're looking at that you feel like maybe we should look at and look into some of these different things, and people need to focus more on it, and any projects that you have going on. And of course, please give everybody all the ways in which they can contact you and everything. So,
yeah. So I haven't been doing my show as consistently. It's been like once every month or two. And it's because my life has changed over the last few months. I'm in a different place now. But you can follow me on Twitter at Reed Coverdale, and then you can follow my YouTube channel, The Naturalist Capitalist, and that podcast is also on Rumble, Odyssey, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I've had lots of guests: Peter Schiff, Ron Paul, Abby Martin, lots of different people talking about all sorts of different things. So you can go check that out. I got almost 300 episodes out now. Parting words, I'll just say, I would challenge everybody who listens and does podcasts, make sure that at the end of the day, you're living out your values, I guess. Like, a lot of people either give great talks or listen to great ideas all day long, but at the end of the day, nothing about their lives actually changes. So try to live your best life and live out your values in a way that is, exemplary to other people, so they can follow your example. And that's the only way you really create change, is by changing the people around you, by changing yourself first, and then hopefully changing other people just by being, around them. And I guess that's what I'd say. So thanks for having me on, man. I enjoyed the conversation as well. Sorry it took so long. I was banned for a while, so
hey, I'm one of those people. I believe that everything happens how it's supposed to happen, and so it was meant to happen at this point to get you on here. Hopefully you'd be willing to come back sometime, for another follow-up interview, or even just join in the panel. If you're off on I know our time is kind of funky on a Saturday night. We kind of started that during the pandemic when nobody can really get out anyway. And Chris in Florida and me in California, how lockdowns were out here. So, I mean, and with my faith, I just don't really get out nearly as much as I used to anyway. So, you're definitely welcome. I got to hit you up about some of those people, because I would love to chit chat with some of those guests, or if nothing else, you could at least just pass some questions to them, because I would love to hear their thoughts on it, whether it's on camera or not. Just some of those guests, because it's a lot that I wonder about. But yeah, brother, I definitely appreciated having you on here. This has been the Political Matrix. Of course, you guys know where you can find me at. Of course, all my different links. Look up Young Morpheus. If on Twitter, you guys can find me there. Political Matrix, Been Thinking with Young Morpheus, and of course Hebrew Apologetics with Young Morpheus and Jose, which we will be working on. I think we'll be doing Daniel, the book of Daniel part 2 coming up again, which goes into a lot of this prophetic stuff, which I believe in. I know it's some people don't necessarily agree or believe, but it's all good. And I think that if anything else, it is just, even if you are a non-believer, come and check it out, because it might just be interesting, if nothing else. So that said, thank you everybody for tuning in, and for those catching this later on, hopefully you guys enjoy it. Please share it also if you really enjoy the content, and definitely, support independent voices. Have a good one, everybody.